Coping with COVID is brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Visit scdheck.gov for an updated list of testing sites and important information on how to protect yourself, your family, and friends from the coronavirus. SCDHEC, healthy people, healthy communities. Also, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, helping to meet the needs of small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the City of Columbia. Log on to columbiasc.net/OBO. Agape Counseling and Training Center. Call 803-779-2777 for licensed professionals of counselors and social workers helping families, engaged and married couples, and individuals of all ages gain an understanding of all aspects of their life. If you're having a challenge coping with COVID, contact Agape Counseling and Training Center at agapects.com. And Columbia Housing Authority. The agency is looking for stories from former residents of Allen Benedict Court to retain some of the property's rich history. In its 80-year life, Allen Benedict Court has been home to some of the country's elite, including a Grammy Award-winning performer, corporate executives, national television celebrities, a host of doctors, lawyers, and NBA greats. So share your pictures, mementos, and memories at chcares@chasc.org. Coping with COVID, brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Columbia Housing Authority, Agape Counseling and Training Center, and Palmetto Media Connection.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.
Fight the spread and take a stand against coronavirus. Wear a mask in public. Stay at least 6 feet apart from others. And get tested. Join us and fight the spread. Visit scdheck.gov/COVID-19.
Good Tuesday afternoon. I'm Tre Tailor, and you are watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you strive and survive COVID-19. As you know, it's brought to you in part by SCDHEC, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, also Palmetto Media Connections, and Agape Counseling and Training Center. Listen, if you are having some challenges coping with COVID, please contact Agape Counseling and Training Center. Well, I often say we are living in a pandemic within a pandemic. COVID and racial tensions have certainly been prevalent during this already added stressful time during concerns amidst COVID, and law enforcement have been smack dab in the middle of the conversation. So let's talk about policing. And since we're here in Columbia, South Carolina, I am anyway, we've asked Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott to join us. He's going to join us along with Columbia Police Chief Skip Holbrook. And we did ask a few other departments to join us, but they are unable to. But I wanted to bring in someone that also teaches de-escalation, because that has been a big topic of conversation. So Joe Francis joins us. He's a 20-year vet of the New York City Police Department and also trains people in what is called verbal judo. He'll join us also. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We're going to talk to all of them coming up next. Hiring, training, and discipline concerning police. That's next on Coping with COVID. But first, your COVID community updates. Well, last week we told you about the start of phase 2 reopenings in several local districts. Now we learned that Richland 2 has pushed back their original October 26th start time 10 days later to November 4th. The district says they are concerned about the high level of COVID cases and hope the next report from DHEC will show a greater decrease. Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett is facing a second day of questions during her confirmation hearing. The appellate court judge with very little trial court experience is being grilled in 30-minute segments by Dems opposed to the president's nominee. Republicans are hoping for a quick vote before the November 3rd election. SCDHEC has the most up-to-date lists of times, dates, and locations for COVID testing in and around South Carolina. Check the bottom of the screen for more information throughout the show and visit scdheck.gov for more information. We also have information about the DHEC Care Line now. You can call that number and get more information about COVID, more information about tests, and if you need transportation to a COVID test. Now, if you're unable to make it to a COVID test, if you're immobile, Richland County and also Clarendon County paramedics are actually doing in-home testing. You can contact 911 and schedule those tests. Now, there are also a lot of flu shot seminars and things going on throughout this city. Prisma Health is doing it. There are also several events for veterans. So again, information about that will be scrolling at the bottom of the screen. You can win some prizes just for wearing a mask from the city of Columbia. All you have to do is visit maskupcolumbiasc.com, post a picture of yourself wearing a mask, get your family and friends to like it, and then you could be a winner. It's maskupcolumbiasc.com. Now, if you're having some problems taking care of your rent or your mortgage, the South Carolina Bar Association and SC Legal Services have collaborated to put together a toll-free number and website for rental and mortgage help. Again, that information is listed right there on the screen. The City of Columbia also has a 6-month payment plan for those folks needing it to take care of their water bills. You can contact the Water Bill Department for the 6-month payment plan or for up to 75% in payment assistance. SCDO, the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, continues to have open registration for several free courses and certification, everything from business to technology, health, data science, arts, and humanities. Now, courses are often in English and Spanish, and if you want more information, you can visit scdo.gov. And also, the end of the month, October 31st, is the final day to register. The South Carolina Democratic Party is hiring canvassers to visit people and leave information at their homes. The pay is $15 per hour, which includes training. Now, you must be at least 18 years old, be computer literate, and own a smartphone. Visit Executive Director at richlandscdems.com. We talked to Rashonda Pratt a couple of weeks ago, and she had some great information for virtual learners and virtual workers. And if you need that information, please visit her Facebook page. And get information and tips on virtual learning. There's the information right there for Rashonda Pratt. And Brooklyn Baptist Church Northeast and West locations, also Lakeview Empowerment Center, and also Rehoboth Church are doing food basket giveaways Friday and Thursday this week and the next 5 weeks through November. Please visit the Brooklyn Baptist Church website for more information. Finally, this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and if you or someone you know needs some help, there's some information on the screen. Please contact them if you need the help. Coping with COVID is streaming live on the Tailor Made production page. That's the home for Coping with COVID. Please go over there and like and follow it so that you can not only watch Coping with COVID Monday through Saturday at 2 p.m., you can also get all of your COVID-related updates. We're also streaming live on the YouTube channel, the Tre Tailor YouTube channel. So please go over there and hit subscribe. I'm Tre Tailor, and you are watching Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. And today we're talking about policing, hiring, training, and discipline. And to lead the conversation, William Holbrook is the chief of police for the Columbia Police Department. He has been here since 2014, but has over 29 years of law enforcement experience. He's worked in West Virginia and in Charlotte, North Carolina. Under Chief Holbrook's leadership, the Columbia Police Department has been recognized by the U.S. Department of Justice, has received South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Association Award of Excellence, and awarded national accreditation by the Commission of Law Enforcement Agencies. Chief Holbrook is the recipient of the Strom Thurmond Award for Excellence in Law Enforcement and currently serves on various executive boards, including the South Carolina Law Enforcement Officers Association, the United States Attorney's Law Enforcement Coordinating Committee, and was recently appointed to the National Committee for Police Reform and Racial Injustice. Chief Skip Holbrook. Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott graduated from both the FBI National Academy and National Executive Institute, Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government, and Furman University's Diversity Leadership Academy. He came to the Richland County Sheriff's Department in 1975 as a patrol officer, moved up the ranks, and has made a successful run for sheriff in 1996. He immediately turned the direction of the department to community-oriented policing. Sheriff Lott was promoted to the rank of Brigadier General Commander of the South Carolina State Guard in 2018. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for joining us today on Coping with COVID. I appreciate it. Now, I think both of your mics are muted. Thank you so much. It'll be kind of hard to have that conversation that way. Before we start the conversation, Sheriff Lott, I want to ask you, what is community-oriented policing and how is it different from what it was when you took over the department?
It's very simple. It's just the community and law enforcement working together as partners to address problems in the neighborhood, and with the goal of preventing crime, not so much arresting people. Before I took over, the emphasis on how many arrests you can make. To me, that's almost a sign of failure if you have to make an arrest. So our goal should be preventing crime, and that's what community policing does. It works hand in hand with the community.
All right. Want to say hi to Mitchell Peace Joy Jen. She says it's great to see both of you on the show. Thank you so much, Mitchell, for joining us. I want to say hi to everyone who is joining us today. So let me ask you, gentlemen, first, how are police officers recruited? And Chief Holbrook, you can go first. Well, I think he's frozen.
He's frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen. Sheriff Lott, you want to answer the question? How do you?
Is that on mine or is that on your old?
I think it's on your end. Yeah, go ahead, Sheriff Lott.
Right. We don't have an official recruiting. Our recruiters are our deputy sheriffs who are out here working every single day. And the fact that, what they do out in the community and the professionalism they display, that's our recruiters. And people see that. Family members see it, and then they pass that on to other family members who have a desire to get in law enforcement. So our recruiting is just done by what we do every single day. I guess the old Baptist hymn has made the work I've done speak for me, and that's pretty much what we do. Is the work that we do speaks loud for us. So we're fortunate in that we have a waiting list of people ready to come work here. We're not experiencing what some other departments across the United States are having with difficulty in getting people to come in. So, the fact that we have so many applicants, we can pick the best ones. And so we do choose the best ones to be a Richland County Sheriff's Department deputy. But, it's our deputies every single day. What they do in the community, I think, is our best recruiters.
So, Chief Holbrook, while we have you, I want to go ahead and ask you the same question. How are police officers recruited in Columbia?
Well, I was catching bits and pieces of what the sheriff said, but I can say with certainty we all recruit that we look for that same qualifying qualities about young men and women that have a heart of service. Obviously, what I consider to be a home run for a recruit is finding that local product, somebody from the neighborhoods that we police, and that's challenging for us, but we also live in an area that is very military friendly. That's a great proving ground for us, and we always take advantage of that. And then being in a community that has 5 colleges and universities is something that we always look at take advantage of. But these every contact we have with the public, we really encourage our officers. They are absolutely our best recruiters. They know what it takes to be a police officer and what it takes specifically to be a police officer here in Columbia or Midlands. These are challenging times, and I think people are, questioning that career choice right now. Yeah. So it's more imperative that we take every opportunity we interact with the public to be that recruiter and find the people that have that heart for service.
Well, you mentioned military, and I want to get back to that in a minute. But first, Sheriff Lott, I want to ask you, you said that there's currently a rating list for the Richland County Sheriff's Department. So what happens to those people on the waiting list?
Well, they're either still in school or they have employment somewhere else, and they're just standing by waiting until we do have an opening, and then we give them a call. We go ahead and take applications all the time and process them. So we don't wait till we have an opening and start. So our process takes about 3 months to make it through the whole process. So we do that, and then I do the final interview and basically say, look, we don't have a job opening right now, but you've been approved for a job. And just stand by and wait till we have an opening, and then we'll give you a call. So, and we see right 99% of the people go ahead and wait till they get that call.
So when someone is interested, like in your case, you have people on a waiting list. Do people typically decide what area they want to be in, or do you look at their qualifications and then make that determination and then place them based on that?
No, everybody starts at the bottom. I tell people that you can't come in and be a detective or a captain from day one. You got to have that foundation. You're cheating yourself if you don't. So everybody starts at the bottom. As a deputy sheriff, goes through the initial training. It takes about 2 years before you really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. So everybody does start at the bottom unless someone comes in with a specialized skill, maybe from another agency that we have a need for. But most people start at the very bottom and then work themselves up.
All right. So, Chief Holbrook, let me ask you the same question, but let me tweak it a little bit. Not so much you come in as a deputy, but what happens, like, for instance, I wouldn't come in and want to work the streets. I'd want to come in as a PIO. You know what I mean? So what about that? I mean, as far as departments, what departments a person works at, was that something that you guys determine, or is that something the applicant determines?
Well, by and large, it's something that we determined, and just as the sheriff said, most entry level positions, they are starting. They've got to learn to be a police officer. They've got to learn to walk before they run. What we do see with our young adults today is they want to advance very quickly. They want to do what they consider to be the real interesting things very quickly. We're a young department, a little bit different than the sheriff's department in terms of probably our youth. We probably have almost 40% of our department years on the job. So there's inexperience, and we have to get people trained up and give them that experience. We also hire specific for a specialized unit. We recognize that we have some skill sets that they're possessed by a few people out there that can bring be an immediate asset to us, whether it's a chemist, somebody that has an expertise in alcohol enforcement in particular. And things like that. So we do have some specialty skill sets, emergency management, that we have hired specifically for. But by and large, you come in the door, you go through basic law enforcement training with us in-house at the academy, and then you come back to us, go through field training, and learn to be that police officer before you start advancing through the department.
Right. Well, I want to talk about training a little bit later, but for the sake of this discussion, let's talk about, I guess, just officers that would work beats or on the street. Is there a distinction there as far as where they would be placed in neighborhoods, or what they would be doing in those neighborhoods? Chief Holbrook?
Well, yes, ma'am. Well, we try to, we take a lot of pride in being a diverse organization that reflects our community. We're about 40% minority. And that's not exactly where we need to be in terms of our community, but pretty close. So in terms of deployments we have 5 regions, and each region has 4 squads. We try to create the most diverse squads that we can, and push that diversity, into the regions that they serve. And we try to, keep a good balance and mix. As we do that, we feel like that puts us in a position for success, in the regions, and help us build relationships.
Right. What about over at the Richland County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Lott? Do you people on the street, is there a distinction there as to where people are placed when they come into the department?
Not really. We just, very diversified here, and we have to go beyond just black and white. We have a Muslim community, Hispanic community, Asian community. So we have deputies that represent all these type communities. And some parts of our county, will have more Asians or more Hispanics, more Muslim. So if we have a deputy, then they'll usually work in that area. But, we want them to be able to work with everybody. So, we try to spread them out throughout the department, and then they do move from region to region. We want them to know everything about the county and not just be locked into one little particular area. And if they live in the county, a lot of them do live in the county, and we try to assign them to a region where they live in too.
We're talking to Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott and Columbia City Police Chief Skip Holbrook about policing in Columbia, South Carolina. Mitchell Peace Joy Jen wants to know, gentlemen, can people be trained to be a neighborhood watch person?
I'll answer that, definitely. We have a community action team, and that's their main responsibility. They're all assigned communities throughout the county, and their job is to make sure that each one of these communities have a neighborhood watch or crime watch group or neighborhood association. And all that is a bunch of nosy neighbors who are organized and they are. So yeah, we emphasize that a lot. We go to all the meetings. We make sure that that group belongs to the community, and we're just there to support them.
All right. So there is formal training for
Yes.
someone to be community watch. Is that the same in the city? Chief
Yes, ma'am,
Holbrook?
it is. Yes, it is. We have a community response team, just like the CAT team with the Sheriff's Department, and you will also find at those community meetings and neighborhood watch meetings and discussions about establishing those, you will always see in the city, you'll see a police officer that's in attendance along with a deputy sheriff.
So what are the qualifications to become an officer in Columbia and Richland County? We'll start with Richland County first. What are the qualifications, Sheriff Lott?
Well, statewide, you got to be 21 years of age. So that's to begin with. But we require a college degree or associate's degree and some military experience. So we look at the education, but we also look at experience. If they've got it from another agency or if they got it through military, that's the biggest things that we look at. They got to be physically fit. One of the first things we do is they have to take a physical fitness test. If they can't pass that, then we don't even take their application. And so, they have to have, and the Chief Holbrook said it earlier, they have to be service oriented. They have to have a servant heart, want to serve the community. So we look at each individual on why do they want to become a police officer. And if they come in and say, it's to drive fast cars and lock people up, that doesn't happen.
Right.
They've got to have that desire to help this community and serve people.
Would somebody actually say that?
Oh, yes.
Really?
They do.
That's interesting. Because I would think somebody would know that's not the right thing to say.
Well, you'd be amazed at what people will say when they're on the applicant, and they do. One thing we do ask them is, why do you want to become a police officer? Why do you want to come work at Richland County Sheriff's Department? I want to know the questions, and usually during the process, when their background check, and that usually comes out. But then when they sit down with me for the final interview, or they go in front of our interview board, that's the biggest thing is they have a 7-person interview board. They ask those hard questions. And if they don't make it out of the interview board, then that's it. I've never went against the interview board if they've given a thumbs down to somebody.
All right, I want to come back to the 7-person interview board, but first I want to ask you, Chief Holbrook, what qualifications are the same qualifications to be a Columbia police officer?
Pretty much, yes. 21, citizen of the United States. We accept applicants for high school graduates. We obviously prefer military or college. Some college, we incentivize your entry-level pay based on that history. We want somebody of good character, moral compass, always in the right direction, solid background. We look at financials to make sure that somebody's financial house is in order. They got to be in good shape, be able to pass a psychological test, background investigation, fitness, really the same standards for the most part.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned, the background check, because that was going to be my next question. So you said you do check for credit or financial stability. What about domestic violence, criminal activity, mental health, legal or prescription drugs, or family history? Is any of that included in the background check?
Chief? That's all on the table. Obviously, we use open sources and then sources that we have available to us to get to the bottom of those matters, whether they're national databases or just knocking on doors, knocking on doors in the neighborhood, reaching out to references, but also people that are not references, people that you come across just in the course of your background. We do an extensive psychological screening and then drug tests. So it's a thorough background investigation.
Is it the same at the Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Lott?
Yeah, we also do polygraphs, and today's world we check social media, but not only just the applicant's social media, their friends' social media. They may not have something, but if they're associated with someone and you go look at their social media and they're posting things that they shouldn't be posting, then that gives us a cause for concern. So we look at that. So it's it's very intense background checks by both departments to make sure that we're getting the right people.
Yeah, that sounds like it's pretty extensive, because I was going to ask, I mean, are we just going by what they say, but you saying, you're doing references. Chief Holbrook, you even said you're asking their friends. Sheriff Lott, you said you're going into their friends' social media, which is key.
I think another important note or takeaway is that the sheriff won't hesitate to pick the phone up and call me, and I would be the same way on if somebody is been unsuccessful in application for a quality reason, character reason, not just because there may not be an opening, but we frequently talk about applicants or somebody that wasn't hired versus was hired, and the same goes anytime we have to separate an employee. We have standard reportings that we do with the state, but we also communicate frequently with each other about that.
Yeah, that's very important too, and that's the other thing I was going to ask. And when we get to the conversation about discipline, and I'll ask that later. What happens? Is there something in place? And I know that's kind of been talked about a lot lately. What happens? Can you go from department to department to department with a crazy background, with an unacceptable background, and be hired again? We'll talk about that in a minute, but let's continue to talk about testing and the background check. So what about past employment? Are we looking at, and Chief Holbrook, you mentioned that military, people in the military have preferential treatment. And so, of course, previous work in law enforcement, the penal system. So what are you looking for? Because listen, I mean, you could be in military and be great, but if you've served, particularly in some type of battle situation, you may have some PTSD. So what are you looking at when you give the preferential treatment, as you said, to people in military?
You asking me?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, obviously we ask questions like that in our, in our background check. We also look for somebody that's been honorably discharged. We do there's, probably more examples than ever of people coming out of being in theater, coming out of combat situations that, have maybe have some damage that they don't even recognize at that point. So we have to be tuned into that. We have a very comprehensive psychological screening exam that goes on that has identified itself, with applicants where they are either being treated through disclosure or they note some things on their screening that causes the evaluator to ask some further questions, and then that's communicated back to us. And if it's something that we can overcome, we certainly do. But there are situations that it does prevent somebody from getting hired.
Sheriff Lott, what about testing for temper or disposition?
That's part of the psychological testing. Before anybody can be a law enforcement in our state now, it's mandated they have to go through psychological testing. So, and that's part of what they're testing for, is just overall mental health. And so their temper will show, that's revealed in these tests. But going back to the background, we check their employers. What kind of employee were they? Did they show up on time? Did they have any issues? Did they have any problems? So we go back, with every employer that they've listed. And if they fail to list someone and we find out about it, then that's disqualifying because they're not being honest with us.
Mm-hmm. Johanna Brissett says, thank you for watching their affiliation. Mitchell Peace Joy Jen, I see your question about training, and I'm going to get to that in a minute when we talk about training. But what about now? Okay, so after this person has gone through all of this extensive background checking, how often are current officers then checked again for mental health, drugs, criminal activity outside the department once they've been hired?
Criminal activity, we're going to know if they've been arrested somewhere. We're going to know about that. Mm-hmm. We do random drug tests. We do once a month. We have 5 people randomly drug tested, and then I have lunch with them, and we sit down and talk. And just got finished with that today. And then we drug test anybody in our evidence room, narcotics, our lab. Every 6 months, they're tested, but they're also part of the random drug testing. So we're checking for drugs constantly on that. Mental health wise, it's kind of, we look out for each other. We teach all of our officers, you're going to recognize if someone's having some issues that you work with, and that's your duty to say something about it. So we kind of self-police on that. We want to make sure that we don't have, not only do we physically take care of them, also we got to do mentally take care of them.
Right. The same over at the police department, Chief Holbrook?
Yes, ma'am, it is. We offer that, or we require the random drug testing, but we also offer some law enforcement assistance. Folks come in, self-disclose if they're having some issues, but we also put great emphasis on intervening and policing ourselves when you see something that just doesn't look right with a fellow officer, to let somebody know, to see if we need to inquire further.
Chief Holbrook, you said it's offered. Is it mandatory or is it offered?
What psychological?
Yeah, the psychological. Mm-hmm.
Well, we will require it if we see some behavior that we think is out of character. We absolutely will have required it, and we will continue to do that. Yes.
Mitchell Peace Joy Jen wants to know, what training is law enforcement getting to deal with individuals with mental illness? Thank you for your question.
We have officers that are trained just in that, but every deputy here goes through crisis intervention training. So we got with the National Association of Mentally Ill, and they designed a program so every deputy goes through how to deal with someone with mental illness. But we also have officers that are specially trained that have a more advanced training than that. And so when we have a call that's got to do with someone with a mental illness, then this team will respond to it. Department of Mental Health has a couple of their counselors that are assigned full-time with us, so we work hand in hand with them. It's not a crime to be mentally ill, and unfortunately over the years, people with mental illness have been treated like criminals. So a lot of training goes in to make sure that we don't do that. And we're usually the first responders to get these calls, so the deputies have to be able to recognize that someone in a mental health crisis and then get the professionals involved in it.
Well, a lot has been said about training and the ability of officers to know when and what to say and when it's too much and how to de-escalate a situation. Sheriff Lott and Chief Holbrook will come back to us in just a couple of minutes, and then we'll be joined by someone who spent 20 years in the New York City Police Department teaching officers, several years with school security, and also goes into all types of businesses, corporations, organizations, teaching what is called verbal judo, how to use your brain and not your brawn. We're going to be joined by Joel Francis coming up next on Coping with COVID. I'm Tre Tailor. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be right back.
Coping with COVID is brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Visit scdheck.gov for an updated list of testing sites and important information on how to protect yourself, your family, and friends from the coronavirus. SCDHEC, healthy people, healthy communities. Also, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, helping to meet the needs of small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the City of Columbia. Log on to columbiasc.net/OBO. Agape Counseling and Training Center. Call 803-779-2777 for licensed professionals of counselors and social workers helping families, engaged and married couples, and individuals of all ages gain an understanding of all aspects of their life. If you're having a challenge coping with COVID, contact Agape Counseling and Training Center at agapects.com. And Columbia Housing Authority. The agency is looking for stories from former residents of Allen Benedict Court to retain some of the property's rich history. In its 80-year life, Allen Benedict Court has been home to some of the country's elite, including a Grammy Award-winning performer, corporate executives, national television celebrities, a host of doctors, lawyers, and NBA greats. So share your pictures, mementos, and memories at chcares@chasc.org. Coping with COVID, brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Columbia Housing Authority, Agape Counseling and Training Center, and Palmetto Media Connection.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.
I know what most people think. If he broke my jaw, I would just leave. But it's more complicated than that. There are days when you tell yourself to go. Go, 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 just go. But when you get in that car, you freeze. You think, oh my God, I can't access the bank account. Oh my God, I literally have nothing with my name on it, not even the credit card in my wallet. Oh my God, I'd have to quit because he knows where I work. See? Not that easy to leave, is it?
October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and if you need some information, please check the graphic at the top of the screen. Tomorrow on Coping with COVID, In It Together and Wellness Wednesday presents Coping with COVID. And Wellness Wednesday, we're actually going to talk about domestic violence. So join us tomorrow at 2 o'clock here on Coping with COVID. And again, if you need some information about domestic violence, please contact someone who can help you. That's tomorrow. Today, we're talking about police hiring, training, and discipline. Sharon Leon Lott with Richland County and the City of Columbia Police Chief Skip Holbrook join us. And we're adding Joel Francis to the conversation. In his 20-year career working the streets and subways of New York City Police Department, Joel trained officers in tactical communications and served as the commanding officer for the New York Police Department's Verbal Judo Training Unit, where he taught the powerful art of persuasion. He was also the lead lecturer for the implementation of the New York Police Department's Courtesy, Professionalism, and Respect program. Joel served 2 years as the Chief of Staff for Special Projects and the Chief of Education and Training for the Baltimore Police Department, where he successfully instituted a Uniform Sensitivity and Action program, resulting in a 21% reduction in complaints in 2 years. As an adjunct professor at John Jay College, he taught police supervision in a multiracial and multicultural city and attained an in-depth understanding of campus police safety while an assistant director of both the Columbia University and Monroe College Departments of Public Safety. Joel is a certified Myers-Briggs facilitator and is certified to teach unconscious bias by the Cultural Intelligence Center. He presently conducts unconscious bias seminars and verbal judo seminars for law enforcement, security, educational institutions, customer service, private corporations, representatives, government agencies, and hospitals throughout the United States. Joel, thank you so much for joining us today on Coping with COVID. I appreciate your expertise.
Thank you, Trey. I sound really good on paper. Wow.
I tell you. Look, I won't say. I was going to say, you learned all of that by keeping me in order when we were growing up in New York.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. In the neighborhood.
That's right. So, Joel, tell me, what is verbal judo?
Well, as you mentioned, Trey, it's the art of persuasion. How do you get somebody to do what you want them to do when they don't want to do it? Mm-hmm. And, you know, law enforcement is where it was born. Okay, right now, any industry that runs into conflict with people is interested in the program. I've done librarians, healthcare workers, you name it. You name the industry, they've subscribed to Verbal Judo. But it was born with Dr. George Thompson, the founder of Verbal Judo, really having a need to help police officers, to help law enforcement in this country.
Right. So how is it taught?
Well, it's actually a 2-day program. Most agencies now do 1-day programs. And we also do a train-the-trainer program. I'm not sure if the chief Holbrook or Sheriff Lott had sent any of their instructors to the program, but very often states will send trainers to learn how to teach the program. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's by the term itself, verbal judo, you can see that it's actually also founded in the martial arts. Right. Judo means gentle, do mean way, the gentle way. So we're still going to win. We're just going to win in a gentler, more civil manner. Okay. Right. And when you think about the martial arts, the highest level of skill is to never have to fight.
Right, right. Yeah. So you say it's taught several different ways, and you say the training is between 1 and 2 days. Can you really get it in that length of time, Joe?
Well, it actually has to be up to the individual agencies to want to reinforce what they're being taught. Right.
Okay.
It has to be all in. The gentleman that you just had on, it seems like they're all in. They have a lot of experience with diversity and inclusion. They seem to really be vested in that as far as the dispositions of their officers, and that's what you need. You need that type of attitude from the top, because
Right.
everything comes from the top and then it trickles down. If we come in and do a training for a couple of days and then after we leave, I'll tell you, I'm sure Chief and Sheriff will understand what I'm saying. The officer goes out and patrol and the old timer tells him, hey, listen, that's what they say in the academy. Let me show you how it's really done.
Right, right.
Things can go by the wayside. But if it's constantly being reinforced at the first level supervision, at that level, then the whole department will tend to move in that direction.
Well, speaking of the whole department, does everyone in the department need it? Would you suggest everyone have it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do a separate program also for managers and supervisors, not just in police. I mean, in general, in so many industries, people are upset. We're going through a lot right now. Who's at home teaching their own kids right now that had no idea they'd have to do that before? People have things going on. Whose family member just passed from COVID? And now they have an interaction with law enforcement. They're already upset. And what we never think about is that law enforcement officer is we're hired from society. It's a microcosm of society. So they also have their own stuff going on.
Right.
And, so yes, everybody needs some sort of de-escalation training. At least, so when people ask me, well, what about this defunding the police? I'm exactly opposite. We actually need more training, not less.
Right. Well, we want to bring Sheriff Lott and Chief Holbrook back into the conversation. And I want to ask you both, is this something that you've done in your department, either this or something like it?
I guess I'll start off, and it is. It's something we teach. We do have people that are certified in it, and so every deputy has to go through it, and then it's reinforced every year. They have to go back through a week-long training every year so they get it. But we just don't do it that one time. That's something we emphasize all the time is de-escalation tactics. And Joel, I'm glad that you said that everybody needs it. I use it at home. I have talked to my daughter, my wife, and sometimes my tone or how I say stuff might come off wrong. So we have an agreement. If I'm saying something that's like that, they'll say, Daddy, your tone's a little bit rough. So that's a signal to me that, okay, maybe I need to say what I want to say and say it in a different tone. So we all can use it. We can use it in our personal life, but also in our professional life. So it's very important that everybody knows that your tone, your facial expressions, how you stand, all that's part of verbal judo.
Right.
And you can de-escalate a situation without ever saying anything, just how your expression on your face. So yeah, it's very important. It's always been that way. We haven't always trained it, but I think now it's more important now than ever.
Yeah. Is that something you do at the police department, Chief Holbrook?
Absolutely. We constantly are reinforcing de-escalation training. It's part of our in-service every single year. I completely agree with what the sheriff just said. Days when we were probably on the street, we just naturally would de-escalate situations all the time just through the way we communicated. And this is my opinion, but what we see now, especially some of our young adults, they've had their head in a phone or a laptop computer, and you just don't see those interactions that we may once had, just playing basketball, football, kickball, or something outside, having your arguments. It's amazing when you have conversations with these young police applicants. A lot of them have never even been in a fight, a true argument or a fight. But when it comes down to those communication skills, that's so much part of the de-escalation training is how you talk to folks and
right.
How you carry yourself. Understanding cultural sensitive issues. So right out of the starting gate, you're not making a insensitive comment that you may not have had any intention of making a comment that was insensitive, but you may have done that, and it just completely ramp things up before you even get started. And we also spend a lot of time on understanding and recognizing our biases, and how having those blind spots can put you in a position where you're not effectively communicating. So to me, it's all connected. We recognize that very much now, and I think great emphasis has shifted to that type of training. Before, so much time was spent on the gun range, learning to shoot a gun and driving. But what we know now is that represents such a small fraction of what we do every day. And what we do the most of is talk to people, interact with people.
Right. So how big?
Trey, let me just follow up on something that Joel said I think was very important, is that
Sure.
the head of the agency is the one who dictates what happens. And so if the head of the agency doesn't believe in de-escalation and building relationships, then you can't expect the deputy or the police officer on the street to do it. So it's so important that it starts at the top. That to me, that's so important, is that sheriffs and chiefs, agency heads have got to believe in it. And if they believe in it, then the people will believe in it also.
Mm-hmm. So what does training look like in addition to the de-escalation? Sheriff Lott, you said that they go through it and then they re-up, so to speak, every year.
Culture diversity, de-escalation, that's probably two main things that we teach now, but also how to deal with those with mental illness, homelessness, all these issues that we've got in our community that we recognize that are issues now. And having those hard conversations. I think what we've seen over the last 6 months probably is now we're having hard conversations between leaders and the people that they lead, and deputies and police officers are having hard conversations nobody talked about before. So now that's coming out, which is a good thing. We should have been doing that a long time ago, but now we're doing it. And I think that's part of the progress that we need to make. Law enforcement changes, and law enforcement resists changes. We want to do the same thing we've always been doing, and that's not correct. We got to change with cultures. We got to change with the times. Chief Holbrook brought up social media. We both got teenage daughters. They live on the daggum phones. They'll sit across the room from you and not even speak to you, but text you.
Right.
That drives me crazy.
Me
But
too.
that's where our young people live. So we've had to change. So, Chief Holbrook and I are, we've got gray in our hair, those who have hair. And, but we have to understand that the deputies and police officers that work for us are so much younger, and they're coming up in a different time. We have to understand that, and we have to adapt our leadership skills to that, the generation that's there coming up now.
Well, Joel, Sheriff Lott, you made such a great point. And Joel, I want to ask you, because of the complexity of what we are living in now, as Sheriff Lott said, the social media, the intense and then heightened stress and the heightened tension between the public and law enforcement, the disrespect, it seems, that young people have. And I heard you in an interview, Sheriff Lott, say that, with these recent numbers on assaults of law enforcement, you said you felt like a lot of it was because, young people just have a disrespect in general. So, Joel, I want to ask, so has the training changed since you started doing it in the New York City Police Department 20 years ago, and we're doing it now?
No, I'm sure that as the sheriff and the chief both said, when this training, where it comes from, is that cop that was on the street 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Okay, they knew that it was much easier to walk up to somebody when they were really, really stressed out. Say, hey, how you doing, man? My name is Sergeant Francis. I'm over here. I see that you're really going. Is everything all right, man? Anything you want to talk about? Rather than just walking up and say, hey, put that down. What are you doing? Introduce yourself, just common courtesy. And you have to listen to people and know your neighborhoods. Like the chief said, an Asian neighbor, you can see, you have to have that commitment also to the cultural differences. Now, the disrespect, it's really unfortunate. And to all your listeners, I will just ask, please do your best to respect the law enforcement officers. And the reason I say that is because they also want to go home safe. Okay. And it's a very difficult job to do. And in order for them to service the neighborhoods the way that we need our neighborhood service, we need all the help we can get. Okay. So, we do want to go out there. We want to make sure that we're showing respect on both sides. We can't control the public, but we can control our officers. And we're trying to do, I believe, that most law enforcement in this country right now are really trying to do the best that they can.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you do though? How do you talk to somebody? How do you communicate with somebody who doesn't want you to communicate with them? Whether it be disrespect or just don't want anything to do with you, have a negative connotation of what law enforcement is. I mean, because it is tough. It's got to be tough.
Sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes you have to listen. Okay. If there is no imminent threat, if there's nothing coming at the officer at the time, in other words, if there's no sense of attack, but somebody's yelling and screaming and cursing you out, but the public is safe and you're safe, sometimes you just have to listen. Just give it a minute. Maybe there's no rush to go in there and put the handcuffs on right away. Maybe there's no rush or no need to get the person to calm down. Has that ever worked? When we tell somebody, hey, calm down. They'll say, no, I am calm, you calm. So maybe we need to wait and listen. So a lot of actual communication theory is involved in verbal judo, just active listening skills. Let the person talk, let them vent. And then you go in and just ask a few questions. Listen, what's the matter? What's going on? What do you think we can do to do better? Get the person's point of view, get them involved, empower them in the conversation. And when they feel empowered in the conversation, and when they feel a sense of empathy, because if you're asking them questions, it might seem like you really care. And once they see that, maybe we have an opportunity to turn them around and then open up and listen to what it is we'd like them to do.
Right. Chief Holbrook, what do you think?
I think the whole slowing everything down, I think, is one of the takeaways we've learned so much in the last few years when it comes to our tactics, is not rushing into something, not putting ourselves in a position to fail. One of the things that I think has been a tool that we didn't realize we would have when we all invested in body-worn cameras. Through our body-worn camera, just our internal audits we do, they are tremendous teaching opportunities for us. We see how a situation was handled, or maybe it wasn't handled the best way it could have been. It allows us to, huddle up with our officers, review the video and talk about how we might have done something better. To me, it's great opportunities to point something out that was totally missed, total blind spot. And, not only how we positioned ourselves, tactically to be safe, but, maybe how we put ourselves in an unsafe position, or just how we talked to someone, and it created a, much more confrontation than was even necessary. But, there's, so there is, we are experiencing a lot of disrespect, but we also experience with our young adults, especially, they ask a lot of questions. And sometimes it is just simply that they're asking a question. They're not challenging your authority. They're asking a question. And we've had to, I think, learn to understand that better than once upon a time when, there was that failure to communicate, as they say. And we've got to listen more.
Yeah, you make such a great point, and we've got 7 minutes, and I want to respect both of your time, all of your times. But I want to ask you, Chief Holbrook, because there was a situation, just last month, I think a couple of months ago, where one of your officers, you ended up, terminating him because he was in 5 points and used the N-word. He repeated the N-word, and I wanted to bring that up because you talked about body cams. So how were you able to, in that particular situation, learn from that? Because you said you look at the body cam, you can kind of, gather everybody around and figure out, okay, how could this have been better? And then, Sheriff Lott, I want you to talk about the recent case where the officer, quote unquote, body slammed the young lady in custody. How do you learn from those situations?
Well, I'll go first, and you were cutting in and out a little bit, or maybe it's on my end, but you know, so not only in that situation, not only did we have body camera, but you know, as everyone should expect, all our officers and deputies should expect, you know, there was, you know, independent people with you know, cameras, you know, recording what happened too, but you know, that was any personnel decisions or difficult decisions, especially when it results in a termination. You know, it's to me that was not defendable, and it was important to me to you know, we needed to follow our internal procedural process that the officer has, and we you know, expedited that and did that quickly. But I felt like that was something we had to move through quickly, internally and externally. I spent time explaining that internally of what my expectations are, and how that did not meet our expectations as an agency. And again, the sheriff hit on it earlier. It starts with us, and we have to set the tone and the culture. And that was an example of reinforcing what our culture is.
Right. Sheriff Lott, do you want to chime in on that situation or any situation in general? And I know you can't maybe speak to the specific situation because people's, you know, rights and privacy is, you know.
That don't exist. I'll speak about it. You know, we had a deputy that crossed the line and became a criminal and assaulted a young lady. We had a failure on our system to quickly identify it, which I've addressed, and we've made some changes on that. But once it was brought to my attention, it was pretty clear cut. So we found out on Monday. He was terminated on Tuesday and arrested on Wednesday. But to use it as a learning opportunity, I've shown the whole body cam to just about everybody in the department, and you know, started with supervisors and worked on down. And we discussed it on how that's not accepted. That's not the culture that we have here. I think once all the deputies see, you know, they didn't just see the 7 seconds that were shown on a newscast. They got to see the whole almost an hour of all the other stuff that went on, the verbal abuse that went on along with the physical abuse. So they understand why we did what we did, and they understand that that's not accepted here. So, you know, we took some failures that we had. One as an individual that was a deputy, and then also as a department, not to quickly find it. And we've made ourselves better by doing that.
Right. But I've got to ask Sheriff Lott, was this the only incident that this deputy had? I mean, did he just pop up one day and start acting like this?
And that's one of the things that we're looking at, that we failed on that. He had more use of force reports than anybody else in that region, and that should have been caught by supervisors. And that's an internal issue that I have to address, in which I am addressing that. So, no, it just wasn't one isolated.
Right.
And that's where we failed. We should have recognized it a lot sooner. And that's one thing that I told the deputies that work with him. And you know, they're at fault also, because they should have seen him escalate, and they should have seen what he's done, because they did see it. And you know, they contributed by not reporting it. So, you know, they're part of the problem, and they weren't part of the solution.
In this instance, do the deputies who didn't report it, are they also disciplined?
Oh yeah, we've taken action against everybody involved.
Right. Because again, I think, is there, and I know that, you know, there's a loyalty involved. I mean, you know, that's my colleague, you know, so.
Not when they break the law. They're not a colleague when they break the law. And that's the difference. And that's what, you know, when a cop goes bad, it makes all of us look bad. We all suffer for it. So, you know, we all should be, you know, out there making sure that we don't have bad cops. And so, you know, that, you know, there's no loyalty when they cross that line. It's, you know, it's like a little bit of pregnant, no such thing. And so you're either a good guy or you're a bad guy. There's no in between.
Yeah. All right, Sheriff Lott, we have one more question before you guys leave. Mitchell P. Stoygen wants to know, how can the community know their rights when dealing with the police? And Chief Holbrook, you can start.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
The question is, how can the community know their rights when dealing with the police? Here's the question right there. Do you see the question?
Oh, I can read the question. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
That's right. He's frozen. I'll go ahead and then give him
Okay.
opportunity.
Go right
One thing we try to do is training, with our community action team, our school resource officers. We try to educate the community. This is what to expect when you have a traffic stop. This is how you as a citizen can de-escalate the anxiety that a police officer has when they approach the car. There's certain things that you can do. So we try to educate the community, particularly our young people. That's why we use our school resource officers that we have in our schools to talk to young people. These are your rights, but this is also, what is expected. If you have a driver's license, you drive in a car, you have to produce that driver's license. You can't refuse to do that. So we try to educate the public on what their rights are. And again, Chief Holbrook brought it up. We all have body cameras. We have cameras in our cars. So if someone feels like they're not being treated right, or rights are being violated, or the police officer being rude, just don't talk around at school about it, or at the coffee pot at work. You let us know. We can't fix it if we don't know about it. So everything that a law enforcement officer does is recorded now, and we will investigate it. And then, depending on the severity of it, if they've done something wrong, then we'll take the appropriate action.
Yeah. Joel, do you have any comment?
Well, my last words actually would be to law enforcement, just explain why. Check your ego. We all have one, and very often it's our ego that's going to get us in trouble. It's not because we said so. That's why. There's a reason. Explain everything. When somebody says why, just take the time and explain. Yeah. Okay. And for the public and your listeners, Tre, do me a favor. Work with the great men and women of law enforcement. The majority of them are trying to help.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Sheriff Lott with the Richland County Sheriff's Department. Thank you so much for joining us today. And in Chief Holbrook's absence, thank you, Chief, for joining us. And Joel Francis with Verbal Judo, thank you so much for your work with like I said, New York City Police Department for over 20 years, and what you're doing now to really help departments like Sheriff Lott, like Chief Holbrook's, to just help, because we're all in it together. I mean, everybody has a point of view. Everybody has an opinion, but it's going to take all of us. And I'm, like you said, we're all affected some way. We're all humans. I think we just need some sensitivity, to make it through. It's a hard time that we're dealing with right now, but I think we can make it if we are all just conscientious about what everybody else is going through. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. So you can see how to get in touch with all of the folks that were joining us today, Joel Francis, Chief Holbrook, and also Sheriff Leon Lott. I'm actually going to talk to Joel and have him back on, because he's got some great information, more information that I would like to share. Maybe we'll even do an after show if he can hang out a little bit later. Listen, if you or someone has a story that can help someone cope with COVID, please go to the Tailor Made Productions page on Facebook and inbox me. I would love to talk about how we can get your story on coping with COVID. If you have a product or service that can help someone cope with COVID, please email copingwithtreitailor@gmail.com, and we'll talk to you about how you could be a proud sponsor, just like SCDHEC, In It Together, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, and Palmetto Media Connections. Now, tomorrow on Coping with COVID, In It Together presents Wellness Wednesday. We're actually going to talk about domestic violence. Vanessa Guyton with Hush No More is going to join us. We'll also talk to a former officer who was a victim of domestic violence. That is happening tomorrow on Coping with COVID. And then on Thursday, we're going to the doctor's office. We're going to talk to Dr. Tasha Boone, head to her office, see an actual COVID test, and talk to her about some COVID updates. On Friday, Faith Friday with Charles Jackson Jr. with New Laurel Street Baptist Church. And then the Motorcycle Club. We're going to go ride on a motorcycle Saturday. There is a great organization that is, hey, Preston Miles, is a great organization that is riding and cycling with a cause. We're going to talk with those folks. That's coming up on Saturday on Coping with COVID. So please join us then. As always, I leave you with a reading from Jesus Calling. Today is October 13th. And today Jesus says, "Take time to be still in my presence. The more hassled you feel, the more you need the sacred place of communion with me. Breathe slowly and deeply and relax. Relax in my holy presence while my face shines upon you. This is how you receive my peace, which I always provide you. Imagine the pain I feel when my children tie themselves up in anxious knots, ignoring my gift of peace. I died a criminal's death to secure this blessing just for you. Receive it gratefully. Hide it in your heart. My peace is an inner treasure growing within you as you trust in me. Therefore, circumstances cannot touch it. Be still, enjoying peace in my presence. That's your Jesus Calling for today, Tuesday, October 13th. Thank you again so much for joining us on Coping with COVID. I'm Tre Tailor. Until the next time, I wish you peace, abundant blessings, and remind you to please be careful, please be safe, and wear your mask over your nose and under your chin. Have a great one.
Coping with COVID is brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Visit scdheck.gov for an updated list of testing sites and important information on how to protect yourself, your family, and friends from the coronavirus. SCDHEC, healthy people, healthy communities. Also, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, helping to meet the needs of small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the City of Columbia. Log on to columbiasc.net/OBO. Agape Counseling and Training Center. Call 803-779-2777 for licensed professionals of counselors and social workers helping families, engaged and married couples, and individuals of all ages gain an understanding of all aspects of their life. If you're having a challenge coping with COVID, contact Agape Counseling and Training Center at agapects.com. And Columbia Housing Authority. The agency is looking for stories from former residents of Allen Benedict Court to retain some of the property's rich history. In its 80-year life, Allen Benedict Court has been home to some of the country's elite, including a Grammy Award-winning performer, corporate executives, national television celebrities, a host of doctors, lawyers, and NBA greats. So share your pictures, mementos, and memories at chcares@chasc.org. Coping with COVID, brought to you by the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Columbia Housing Authority, Agape Counseling and Training Center, and Palmetto Media Connection.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.